My father's father had a life that reads like a tall tale. His parents emigrated from Ireland in the early 1910s, and they made their money throwing Irish wakes and supporting the Irish Republican Army's activities in the United States, in Boston and in Philadelphia. Then they lost every penny they had when the banks folded in the stock market crash of 1929. And my great-grandfather, my father's father's father, went into such a deep depression that all he could do was sit in his rocking chair, looking out the window for several years. By 1930, my grandfather, I called him Pampa, he was 9 years old and he was over 6 feet tall. And he was always hungry. And so he took up smoking at age 9 to help keep his stomach from rumbling. And he was a stutterer. So his teachers always thought he was stupid. And so he was more than happy to drop out of school after the 6th grade. And because he looked so much older than he was, at 9 or 10, he got a job parking cars as a valet with the Philadelphia Athletics. Later, he became an apprentice to the electrician at a large hotel. He was supporting the whole family by the time he should have been in high school. But even so, he and his baby brother were the only children to survive the Depression. By the end of it, his other 7 brothers had died from illness or starvation or in tragic accidents. In 1941, one afternoon, my Pampa came home at the age of 20 years old to find his mother dead on her bed of a heart attack with his draft notice crumpled in her fist. So he headed off to war, shipped overseas with all the other soldiers in the locked cargo hold of an army ship bound for North Africa. He said that he fired his rifle exactly 16 times and killed as many Germans. That's not including the Molotov cocktails that he threw into Panzer tanks. He got shot in the shin during the war, but he refused to let the doctors amputate his leg, even though they said he would never walk again. So he spent 9 months in a field hospital in Morocco. He did recover. He always said that he was the only person to ever walk out of that field hospital. And he finally reunited with his division, landed on Anzio Beach in Italy, and walked through the gates of Rome on D-Day, 1944. After the war, he came back to Philadelphia, and he got his high school diploma on the GI Bill. After a stint in the Merchant Marine, he met and married my grandmother. A year later, my father was born. By then, Pampa was doing civilian work in the Navy, installing missile guidance systems onto aircraft carriers. He had a knack for doing well on the qualifying tests, and so he started moving up in the ranks. He knew how to play the system. First, he went to middle management and then to supervision of entire building projects. And then, one afternoon in the early 1960s, my grandfather got a visit from Admiral Hyman Rickover in Washington, D.C. He said, "You got the highest score on the qualifying test," Rickover told my grandfather. "And I'm in charge of this new project. We're going to build some submarines with nuclear capabilities. We need 41 of them. We're going to call them the Polaris Fleet. And you are going to be the man in charge of making sure that they get built on time and on budget." So my grandfather became personally responsible for building a fleet of submarines loaded with enough nuclear missiles to obliterate most of the life on this planet. My father distinctly remembers waking up one night when he was 10 or 11, and his father was standing in his doorway crying. He said, "I'm going to be responsible for the death of every living creature on this planet." But my Pampa kept working. His personal code of honor was never about religious morality. He was a staunch atheist. And it wasn't about patriotism. He always used to say that if he'd been born in the Soviet Union, he'd be doing the same thing for them. It was just luck of the draw. But as it was, he had to make a commitment to something. And in this case, he was playing for the American team. So he was going to do his work as best he could and support his family. He finished the Polaris submarine project ahead of schedule, retired with a pension by his late 50s, and lived out the rest of his life reading, watching television, traveling with my grandmother, and loving his grandchildren. Those are a few of the things that my father has helped me to remember about Pampa. Reflecting on this story, I always think to myself, with that much pain in your life, how could you ever open your heart to anyone? How could you ever trust anything or anyone when every phase of your life brought you face to face with the abyss of loss, of death, of destruction? But when I ask my father what lessons he learned from his dad, the first thing out of his mouth is always unconditional love. He always, always loved me, no matter what, and I knew he always would. That's what my dad says. The circumstances of my grandfather's life are so incomprehensibly different than mine that sometimes it's really hard for me to identify with him at all. But as I have been thinking about him this week, as I do every year near Father's Day, as I've thought about how the granddaughter of this atheist architect of a fleet of nuclear submarines could possibly come to find herself delivering a sermon as the minister to a congregation of Unitarian Universalists on a Father's Day, a day when we celebrate our year together and the larger meaning of religious community, I have two conclusions. First, the human heart wants to love, wants to commit to something that matters. No matter what happens, no matter how significant the hardship in our lives, every human heart will love something. A person, a place, an idea, a thing. Second, we have these loves. We make these commitments knowing that nothing lasts forever. People die, wars are waged, tragedy strikes, and our planet is in peril. And yet somehow we still make the choice to love. It seems to me that the purpose of religious community is to celebrate these things, to affirm that in spite of the ephemeral, delicate nature of life on this planet, we have a soul-deep impulse to love. And we need one another to keep reminding us how to do that. To live in this world, the poet says, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing that your life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. When we come together as a religious community and we gather for worship every week, I think we ritually live out all of these three things. We do indeed love what is mortal. Our Unitarian Universalist faith is profoundly this worldly. For the most part, we focus on experiencing the holy in and through one another, and through the ever-changing and always close at hand beauty of the natural world. In our worship services, for that hour that we're together, we affirm one another in all of our messy human complexity. And in that time together, we create something in the worship space that cannot last. We greet one another, we raise our voices in song, we share our joys and sorrows, all knowing that the moment the closing hymn is done, we will have nothing tangible to show for our hour together. No product of our spiritual labor. And yet, week after week, we worship. We affirm that we love the goodness, the abundance, the sacredness of life. We love what is mortal. But Mary Oliver reminds us that simply loving is not enough. She says, you must hold it against your bones, knowing that your own life depends on it. You know what she's talking about? Commitment. Deep, no matter what commitment to the people and places and ideals that we love, even though the great paradox is that we know nothing can last forever. So why would we do something as profoundly silly, as profoundly heartbreaking as to become the member of a religious community? Why do we choose to do things so likely to disappoint and break our hearts and ask us to cope with anxiety and change? What makes it worthwhile to commit to loving things that cannot possibly remain the same forever? Because without such commitments, life is meaningless. We hold things against our bones. We commit because we have no other choice. When you sign the membership book as a symbol of entering into covenant with this congregation, you make a serious commitment to the beloved community. It's not just about making a financial pledge or serving on a committee or two. Here at Open Circle and in our larger Unitarian Universalist movement, this is making a promise to do the hard and messy work of being in long-term, right relationship with the real, messy, flawed, annoying human beings who make up the other members of the congregation. It's making a lifelong commitment to deepening your own spiritual life as a part of that community. Even though the board members will change next month, you will have a different minister in the fall, there will always be another conflict on the horizon, the programs will change, members will move away and will die. But when you signed that book, you said, yes. I cannot know the future, but I will hold you, all of you, close to my bones, commit myself to you. Because my own life, my very spirit is dependent on all of you for its growth and health and well-being. I cannot walk in this world alone. I've been thinking about that concept a lot recently. This is my last day at the church after 10 months with you, and I am very sad to leave. But I want to tell you about a few of the ways that I have been blessed by holding this community against my bones this year. I have been with you as your incredibly gifted, healthy congregations team skillfully finished crafting the covenant of community that is now one of the core set of promises you make to one another as members of Open Circle. I watched you collect dozens of jars of peanut butter, recruit one another to donate food to the world's largest canned food drive, engage in a ministry of generosity by splitting your offering plate once a month. I watched our children learn about their faith, develop relationships with one another, and learn the great spiritual discipline of asking big and important questions, all under the loving guidance of our wonderful religious education teacher, Lisa Hunt, and the incredibly dedicated Religious Education Committee who has served you all so well this year. I heard the stories of middle schoolers coming of age, a burgeoning high school group, each led by dedicated volunteer leadership. And I witnessed the unbelievable dedication of that RE committee and our child care workers. I heard your tender stories of pain and transition and joy when you shared pieces of your lives with me, in person or on the phone or in an email. And I watched Karen and Mary work diligently to lay out a framework for lay-led pastoral care in this congregation that will serve you so well in the future. I had the privilege of hearing the testimonies and questions and faith journeys of new and seeking members, just learning about Unitarian Universalism as Lisetta Aldrich and I led the New to UU class. I was inspired and humbled by the deep covenantal commitment of your board members this year as they shouldered the mantle of responsibility for determining the direction and vision of this congregation. I watched their deep dedication to you, the members, and to the larger vision of making Open Circle a voice of our faith in the broader community as they made decisions, navigated conflict, supported one another's leadership, asked hard questions, and kept the larger interests of the whole fellowship at the core of everything they did. And I was blessed by my committee on ministry, that small group of people who met monthly on the phone with me and members of my other congregation to evaluate my ministry, give support and wisdom, and offer me the greatest gift a person can receive: frank, honest, compassionate, thoughtful feedback. If you've been around Open Circle for a while, I have no doubt that you have been similarly blessed by the people, the committees, the programs, the ministry of this congregation. I have no doubt that your gratitude is as deep as mine for what you have received. And if you are new, just wait. But you know the poem. You know what comes next. You hire a consulting minister on a year-long contract, asking her to preach to you and provide leadership and direction. And at the end of it, all of the love and support and experience you give her will ultimately be used in service of her next congregation. You found and joined communities like this one. You pour your time and energy and your resources into nurturing it. And then, if you've done your job right, new members come in and programs start up anew, and the community is no longer what it used to be, and it is no longer yours alone. We love what we love, knowing that it cannot be ours forever. But maybe the sweetness, the worth and the reward of loving lies in knowing that and loving anyway. In knowing, like my Pampa did, that even though the world could be destroyed in a nuclear Armageddon, it was still important to love, to come home at night and tell his son that he loved him no matter what. The work of being fully human is living with these paradoxes. Committing fiercely to relationship in the face of change and loss, opening our hearts wide, knowing that they will be broken time and time again, loving as well as we can in the moment. And then, when the time comes, having the grace to say thank you. I loved you well, and now I let you go. May it be so. Blessed be. Ashe and Amen. I invite you to join in our closing hymn number 300.